June 3, 1941. St. Petersburg Times, St. Petersburg, Florida. The Times roving reporter. Tattooing still thriving art. Ernie finds on visiting artists at work, by Ernie Pyle, San Diego. I spent today with a couple of tattoo artists, came mighty near to getting tattooed myself and would have, except that I'm already such a handsome figure, they couldn't find any designs that would improve me. My tattooers were Harry Lawson and Owen Jensen, two of the West Coast's best. They say Lawson is one of the 2 or 3 best in the world. He's been at the business 51 years. Both Lawson and Jensen are tattooed themselves. In fact, Lawson is tattooed all over and spent many years exhibiting himself with circuses and carnivals. Lawson is tall and thin and wears a cap, and you think him kind of surly until you talk to him an hour or so, and then he's nice. He sizes everybody up, and if he doesn't like your looks, he'll hardly speak to you. He's plenty independent about tattooing, too. Somebody will come in with a bum tattoo he got in China, and Lawson will want to work it over and make it look like something. He'll say, "You got it in China, did you? Well, why don't you go back there and get it fixed?" And now and then a woman who has been drinking will come in and want to get tattooed. Lawson tells her to get out of there. When she asks why, he says, "Because this is a respectable business and we want to keep it that way. If a lady comes in who looks and acts like a lady, then we'll put a screen around her and tattoo her," he says. Lawson and Jensen have got pretty strict about their tattooing. They won't tattoo anybody who's drunk or anybody under 18 unless his parents are with him, and they won't tattoo anybody on the hands or face. A Mexican boy came in while I was there and wanted a nude tattooed on his forearm. "Nah, you don't want that," Lawson told him. "It'll get you thrown out of every job you ever get. Better take something else," so the boy did. The Lawson-Jensen tattoo shop is a small corner of a cigar store, partitioned off from the rest. The walls are covered solidly with tattoo designs, painted on white paper and framed under glass. There are hundreds for prospective customers to choose from. Lawson has an old roll-top desk with his tattooing instruments sitting on it. Jensen sits at a table with his instruments. When a customer comes in, he sits in a wooden chair in front of the artist. Anybody can stop in and see the work going on. Business is good right now. They say it's nonsense that tattooing is dying out. They say it suffered during the Depression, as everything else did, but that in normal or boom times just as many people get tattooed as ever. Lawson once tattooed a preacher who came in and tried to make him go out of business. He put a 50-cent design on him and charged him $2.50. Then he told the preacher to let that be a lesson not to butt into other people's affairs. Jensen has tattooed a governor of Colorado with a lodge emblem, and Lawson once tattooed a final will and testament on an old man's chest. I asked them if they knew of any tattooing artists who aren't tattooed themselves. They said they know only one. He's a Japanese in Hawaii. It seems tattooing isn't approved in Japan, and this artist's father told him he'd disinherit him if he ever got tattooed. Lawson said that Japanese once told him, "Harry, I want to get tattooed so bad, I can hardly stand it. As soon as my father passes on, I want you to tattoo me all over." A modern set of tattooing instruments costs about $250. Anybody can go into the business. The only way to do it is buy the instruments and read the directions and then just keep tattooing, preferably on your friends, till you acquire skill. A tattooer has to keep long hours. The Lawson-Jensen shop is open from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. Sundays included. You have to pay in advance for a tattoo. The tattooers make a living, but they don't get rich. Tattooers are very jealous of their art, which they say is the oldest in the world. A friend who knows lots of tattooers told me that practically every good one in America claimed either to have tattooed King Edward VII when he was Prince of Wales or else learned the business from the man who did tattoo him. But when I asked Lawson and Jensen who tattooed King Edward, just a slick come-on question, you see, they didn't even know he had been tattooed, so I told them I knew he had been because I was the man who did it. Tomorrow, more on tattooing. June 4, 1941. Toledo Blade, Toledo, Ohio. Ernie Pyle, roving reporter. More about the work of a tattoo artist. San Diego, California. Harry Lawson learned the art of tattooing more than 50 years ago when he was serving on sailing ships. In those days, they just picked the ink in with a single needle by hand. But tattooing is different nowadays. The principle is the same, but it's done by rapidly pulsating, electrically driven needles. The little tattooing instruments make a buzzing noise, sort of like a rattlesnake, and you can hear it clear out on the sidewalk. A tattooer has 7 instruments, each attached to an electrical wire, and he changes from one to another, such as a dentist changes drills. The instruments are all alike, except for the nests of tiny needles in the ends. These are so bunched that each instrument does a different work. One makes a fine line for outlining, one a heavy line for shading, and so forth. The needles are really tiny sewing machine needles. Owen Jensen, partner tattooer of Lawson, makes his own instruments by soldering half a dozen needles in a bunch onto the end of a plunger. This plunger is driven up and down about 1/32 of an inch by a tiny motor. It vibrates several thousand times a second. These needles are made in England, and they're getting scarce, but Jensen has about 12,000 on hand now. When business is good, the tattooers have to change needles almost every day. The needles are dipped in ink before being applied to the skin. The dye comes in powder form, and they make ink out of it by adding a liquid, which is a very strong antiseptic. After each using, the needles are dipped in antiseptic. Lawson thinks tattooers should have to pay a license and abide by certain standards in order to keep out the dangerous ones, but San Diego has no regulations for them. They say tattooing doesn't really hurt, it just tickles. It does draw blood, however. It causes an inflammation around the tattooed spot, which lasts about 24 hours. Your arm is a little sore, then a scab forms, and it's about a week before that comes off. It's apparently much like a vaccination. If you get it done at a good place, there's almost no danger of infection. There is danger at a cheap place, though. Lawson believes that anyone who is tattooed all over doesn't have to be vaccinated and is immune to all fevers. A small tattoo doesn't immunize you, though, he says. I watched a sailor getting a girl's head tattooed on his upper arm. He smoked a cigarette while the tattooer was working and mostly looked in the other direction, as you do when the doctor is about to stab you. It didn't seem to hurt him. A good portion of tattooers' work these days is removing tattoo marks. They do it by what they call a secret process which takes off the skin. It requires about a week, is pretty painful, and leaves a white scar. If a man who was tattooed all over had it all taken off, Lawson says, you'd just have to skin him alive, and it probably would kill him. You can get tattoos to fit your pocketbook. The cheapest one they have is a small bird for 50 cents. The average eagle or ship or anchor design, about the size of your hand, runs from $3 to $5. It takes about half an hour to put one of these on. Light skin takes tattooing better than dark skin. I forgot to ask them if they could tattoo a black man with white ink, but I see no reason why they couldn't. Sailors naturally form the bulk of the tattooing clientele here, for this is a sailor's town, but lots of aircraft workers and Army selectees are also getting tattooed. The old anchor and ship scenes are still very popular, and one of the most popular right now is a very cute design of Betty Boop in Navy uniform. Little mottos about Mother never decline in favor throughout the years. Lately, they do a lot of business putting social security numbers on people. One fellow said he lost his social security card 4 times, so he brought his 5th one in, had the numbers put on his arm in ink, then tore up his card and threw it away. I asked if tourists visiting San Diego ever get tattooed. They said yes. Last summer, a woman tourist from Milwaukee brought 2 little girls in and had their names tattooed on their legs. She did it because she said the world was in such a mess with everybody getting kidnapped or killed by bombs. She wanted her girls to have some permanent identification. Lawson and Jensen, being practically peers in the business, know most of the best tattooers in the country. They say there are probably 1,000 professionals and many more amateurs just learning. Lawson is from Australia, but he hasn't been there for a long time. He studies the racing form between jobs and thinks we should have been in the war a year ago. Jensen hates liquor and can hardly stand to see anybody take a drink. He would give his right arm to talk on the radio every night. He has done it several times and loves it. They both have tattooed many people all over, people who intended going into circuses or carnivals. It costs $600 to get tattooed all over and takes about 2 months. Lawson right now is in the process of all over tattooing a San Diego dredge operator. He works on him every Sunday morning. The man is almost finished now. How I envy him.